Okay. Now, at the end, when I'm done, my name is Mitch Liederman. I am the Senior Associate Director in the Career Management Center, and I'm responsible for overseeing the coaching for our, I believe it's now 14 master's programs, including our 3 MBA programs. I have major and primary responsibility for coaching our 3 Houston-based programs, the Executive Professional MBAs and the MS Analytics. So I want to welcome you all to tonight's program, both current and former students. I know we're in challenging times here, so this is a good time, though, for us to all take a step back from some of the stresses from work, working at home, not having all of our tools accessible, and just take a time to see, how do we position ourselves for when we do get back into the interview hunt and get ourselves ready. It's always a good time to practice before the interview. I always tell all my students the worst time to get ready for an interview is in the interview itself. Just a ground rule or 2 here is it's easier for me if you have a question, if you can just pop in, unmute yourself, ask the question, I'll acknowledge you and then ask it. If not, we're going to have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. I won't be monitoring the chat, so it's probably best at this point just to do the questions verbally. Okay, so with that, we're going to get started, and we're going to try to be as interactive as possible. Normally, I do a program like this, and we do it in person at City Center. We do it in 2 hours. I sent out that we would try to do it in an hour. Please feel free if you have to leave anytime before that, that's okay. I won't take it personally, but we're probably going to go a little bit over the hour, maybe to an hour and 15, an hour and 30 minutes. And a lot of it's going to depend upon how much everybody wants to participate and interact. All right, so with that, let's get started here. And I want to talk about our roadmap for tonight. So briefly, I'll go through the objectives. Oh, Moquavis, you have something?
Yes, 2 things. You can show it as a presentation if you hit display settings.
Okay, I didn't know they were seeing that one. Okay, got it. Now we're there. Okay.
And then you have the access to mute everyone if you would like. You can hit mute all, and it'll
okay. I can do that as well. Okay. Great. This is my first major program. Normally I'm doing one-on-ones with students, but okay. We go good. Thank you for that, Marquavius. I appreciate it. Okay. We're all seeing it now on the full screen. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our program objectives for tonight. Then we're going to do some prep questions review. I sent out some questions last night asking everyone to at least take a thought, consider them a little bit. We're going to then get into really what you need to know about interviewing, executive and professional interviewing, your value proposition, storytelling, which is what it's all about in interviewing, and your key hiring considerations that people are looking for at the executive level. And then we're going to revisit the preparation questions. The reason I'm doing it this way is I hope that through this program, your thinking will have evolved from what you were looking at, those questions that I sent out last night, and then we'll be talking a little bit through, the theory of interviewing and some techniques. And I hope you get to see an evolution throughout this program. Our objective for tonight is really simple. It's to provide a framework for executive and professional interviewing. It's not going to be a one-stop shop. Well, I got to be honest with you, interviewing, it's an art. You got to learn the style. It's something that you need to work on and practice. So what I'm trying to do tonight is give you the frameworks to give you what you can, put yourself in, you can envision yourself in that interview, and then set the stage for future interactions. What that means is setting up, individual coaching appointments with myself, both current and former students, where we can then walk through either specific questions you might have about any of the stages of interviewing or getting yourself prepared, or even go further and we do mock interviews where we'll pretend we're doing a full executive interview, and then I'll give you feedback. So that's our goal for tonight. Any questions before we get going? All right, so with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like someone to volunteer. We're going to go through each of these prep questions, 1 through 5. So I know I said if you could look at all of them, great. If not, at least I did it through last names alphabetically. So I would like one brave volunteer who's willing to give us their response at this time. And please, there are no bad responses, okay? Trust me on this. I've been doing this for 25 years. Whatever you give is a foundation for you to jump off of and to move forward. So if somebody would please volunteer, so I don't have to pick on somebody, tell me about a time in which you brought significant change to an organization. How did you implement this change and what resistance did you have to overcome? And let's not all be crickets.
Mitch, this is Monica Alvarado.
Yes, Monica, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Let's see. I was a senior manager at Chevron for about the last 15 years of my career there. And while I was there, I had to learn change management. So I acted as a change manager and organizational change management person there. One of the biggest changes that I brought about was we took our file rooms for the Mid-Continent Business Unit, and actually this ended up being my capstone project. What we did was when Chevron purchased some leaseholds from another company, the other company was electronic and Chevron was not electronic. So we had to come up with a big Band-Aid, myself and the IT departments and a couple of IT business analysts, come up with a big Band-Aid on how to import these electronic files and documents for these land leases and how to get them associated with our major business points, such as finance, accounting, the engineers, the geologists, and everybody else who needed these records. We need to teach them how to use and research electronically, and like I said, a Band-Aid. We had to come up with that for it. So it was not only just importing the records, there was a behavior change management along with it. I didn't receive any resistance because it was do or die. The resistance that I received at the end was that management felt that these documents were backed up onto the company's big drive, their whole data backup system. So, and that the Band-Aid was working well enough, so they didn't see any reason to change it. And since we were going through layoffs at the time, and most of the engineers and everybody else that was working on this, including myself, it just became, it's the next generation's problem, not ours. Because there wasn't anything we could do. It worked. It was it was a Band-Aid situation. It was rigged up and it worked, but the company did not want to invest the money to make this part of the permanent records.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any thoughts about that? What they might have learned from what Monica just said about her? Okay, so Monica, what I learned about you was you probably had some innovation or creativity and resourcefulness there, and you probably also had some resiliency, considering that at the end you did all this and everybody just said, well, no, we're not really interested or something. It's just somebody else's problem or something like that. So I want you to keep those thoughts in mind throughout the program here, because we're going to talk about some ways how you can make that even more powerful and more value added. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. So somebody from the second group who wants to volunteer a response. What is the most difficult decision you have made as an executive or manager, and how did it impact you?
Hey, Mitch, this is Robert Heights. I'll offer mine. So about midway through my career at Delta, I was with Delta Airlines, and we were going through the downturn in the industry, and we had to staff. So I, at the time, had a staff of about 23-ish people. I say ish because they're a matrix to me. And we had to just sit down and decide how we were going to reorganize the our internal organization because the entire company was doing this. And I basically had to decide who was out of a job. So it was a difficult time for me. Fell back on what the organization needed most in terms of priority services and what folks could absorb, and ended up just having to deliver to the bad news to the folks that had to go find employment elsewhere.
Okay.
And obviously how it impacted me was it's fairly emotional because I'd never ended anyone's employment before and never even really considered the second and third order effects of that on them or the staff, quite frankly, that survived, if you will say. It was impactful. I never had considered how the staff that remained, I figured they'd be relieved, and much of them actually went through sort of a form of survival guilt. So that was difficult as well.
Okay, great. So anybody have some thoughts about what they learned about Robert from that? So one of the biggest things I think I came away from that was you probably have a much higher sense of empathy going forward now than you probably did before. You've probably now could be in a situation where you're able to put yourself in other people's shoes to see, and to use that as a factor in your decision making. So those are two personality traits or two personal traits I would get out of that from you. And let's hold on to that again, because we're going to go through methodologies for you to make that even more powerful and value added. Okay, thank you, Robert. Let's go to question 3, someone from group 3. The question was, describe a high impact experience that forced you to learn to do something differently or to behave very differently. Who wants to jump in on that one?
Hey, Mitch. This is Jamie McKeever,
Thank you, Jamie.
Executive MBA, class of 2009. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for volunteering. So let's hear your story.
Absolutely. So I work for Chevron as well. So we got 2 out of 3 folks that at least have worked with Chevron. And I've been a downstream leader since the early 2000s. So working sort of after products are refined. And I would say my change that forced me to do things differently is actually the transition to the current job that I'm in. So about 20 months ago, I transitioned from a sales leader managing about a 40-person sort of organization to what we call at Chevron a functional sponsor. So having oversight over an entire function within the business. And so coming from downstream as an entire career experience, there were multiple things that created a difference for me and made me have to behave differently. So now I have to expand my breadth, develop my credibility, and create relationships across the entirety of what we call business and commercial throughout the entire enterprise globally at almost every level within the corporation. So that was a trying and difficult transition and learning curve to progress and get through. But also beyond that, in these roles, my influence is now at not my pay grade or my level in the company, but 1 to 2 to 3 levels above me. So I'm asking people to do work through influence. I've just gone from a 40-person structure to now I'm an individual contributor, where I'm asking folks to do things and take time away from their high impact roles to support a process that we have. And I'm doing that upwards. And so I've learned over the last 20 months how to manage that. And I really appreciate the experience and the breadth it's giving me. But that is in itself created different behaviors and different thought processes and pathways to how do I get folks to do things that naturally they wouldn't normally do in their day job, right? I often joke with them, I'm calling you about your nights and weekends job. So I think for me, that's my experience in my career that's been transformative for me and really taught me a lot about having a growth mindset.
Wonderful, great. So what I heard there was this experience probably really forced you to hone your persuasion, your influence skills, which are really the cornerstone for leadership. And especially also the resourcefulness you had, probably the versatility and the flexibility of having to manage people up. So you're managing up people, understanding that they have different needs, that they are serving several masters, as the phrase would go, and so forth. So I think those are some good things to build off of on that one. And we'll come back to this again shortly. Thank you. Okay, so we've got two more, and then we'll get into some content and real discussions about how to frame yourself. Okay, so somebody from group 4, can you describe a time you failed at implementing a strategic initiative you had developed? No, it's okay, you're among friends here, so none of us will go tattling on you. Nobody's had any failures?
Mitch, this is Monica again. I can offer up one.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to, but thank you so much. Much appreciated, Monica.
Okay, so again, going back to Chevron, I had a rotation to Angola. And when I was in Angola, I was to reorg the information management team. I set everything up. I brought in all the tools, supplies, and everything to do this, all of the knowledge. I sent out prep work for the managers to do, and nobody showed up to my meeting, much less offered up prep work. So I sat there for 2 weeks. I wrote up all the processes and procedures that needed to be implemented for the information management team, sent it out, return receipt, and never got a response. Nobody opened those emails. So what happened over there? I have no idea. But I went and did what I was told to do, and it failed. It belly flopped.
Okay. So I want everybody to take note of the little graphic that I threw on there. Never a failure, always a lesson. And keep that in mind as we go through this and for later, because what we're going to talk about, and you'll see too, is there's a question behind the question here. And when you fail, that's okay, because as an interviewer, I'm more interested in how you came out of it and how you grew from it than the actual failure itself. So let's keep that in mind. But Monica, thank you for the second volunteering. And we have one more. And this one is for those of you.
Hey, Mitch.
Yes.
Hey, Mitch, this is Mahesh. Can I add one more point to that same question?
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah, so it'll be simple. So the previous slide really attracted me well. You know, in your question, you said, you know, you have failed, but this slide really makes it more motivated. It's not a failure, but it's more of making number of attempts for doing things. So in the last job, in the last job, as in literally before I got laid off, 3 years, I tried to put a strategy in that organization for having all of the employees using our HR systems in one single way using single sign-on. And I presented that strategy probably maybe 100 times to the executive leadership. There was a cost involved, and that cost was coming per year about, you know, close to $500,000 or so for the company. But over 3 years, we spent more than $2 million by not implementing that, but going with other options. So I scratched myself, and I've been doing that. Like, what did I not do for putting this in front of the leadership team? And I just did not do it by myself in silo. I, you know, consulted several teams, leaders, and putting several propositions in front of. But I think the decision was not to go because of that initial cost for per year of $500,000. But over the years, 3 years, if everybody looked at it, we spent more than $2.5 million in doing, you know, things that was not a employee-friendly using systems. So this slide really helped me. Maybe I could learn something out of this session. Maybe, you know, anybody else on this forum can suggest. Otherwise, what didn't I not do, right? You know, for making it happen. It could have been in my, you know, resume, that's something I could check off by doing a success story, but rather than it is more of something that I've always looked to myself that, you know, gosh, I could have done something more that would have been implemented better.
Okay. Yeah, and that's something you want to, Mahesh, that's definitely something you always want to be thinking about is I not only in an executive interview need to be boasting about everything I've been successful, but people want to also see that I can grow, that I can handle failure, that I'm resilient, because, you know, find me an executive who've never failed, okay, and that person just doesn't exist. So that's a great point, and that's why I put that on there, and thank you for sharing. Okay, and we're going to come back to these questions shortly. Okay, so let's do the last one, and this is for a question that really gets at how you put together a team. So who wants to talk about what do you look for in a team member? What behaviors and performances do you expect of an ideal associate? That red person sitting in the middle of all the blues.
I can volunteer for that one.
Okay, is that Victor?
Yeah.
Thank you, Victor. Appreciate it. You're on.
All right. So, I mean, what I look in a team member is usually, I try to look for somebody that complements the rest of the team and complements myself, because I usually have very set views, but I like to hear other people's perspectives and bring their own experiences to the table. And once I'm pretty good at changing my mind if I hear a good argument. So I try to bring people like that into the team. And in terms of behaviors, what I like to see, I'm mostly just looking for somebody that's motivated and engaged, somebody that legitimately wants to work towards whatever outcome we wanna achieve. But I'm pretty open-minded, and I'm not set on any specific kind of characteristic or, you know, trait in person other than that.
Good, thank you. So, there's actually something you said there that's interesting, because if you can find the engaged employee, please let us all know. Because, well, I bring that up because a Gallup poll study was done, it's probably now around 4 or 5 years ago, that found the U.S. was one of the least engaged employee groups around the world. And that was really an eye-opener, which they may have done that one on Cyber Monday. Maybe that was the day they did the poll, but I don't know. But it certainly was an eye-opener. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into some content here. And again, if you have a question, you could raise your hand or just jump right in on that. Okay, so this may look familiar for those of you who've been to some of my previous programs, but it's always a good refresher and something to really set the foundation for your career. What I do is the picture on the left, I call it discrete pylons. If you look at the wooden pylons holding up that house is your career, okay? Well, those are all discrete. You can pull one of them out and the house will still be standing. You can pull 2 of them out and maybe it'll be standing. You know, you can argue with a structural engineer that maybe I could even pull 3 of them out. But the thing is they're not necessarily working together, because if you can remove one, then that means it really wasn't that important. What I like to do through my programming and working with students one-on-one is I'd like to get you and help you evolve to that integrated component. So on the right, that's a foundation that's really strong. Each of those bricks is comprised of each of those pylons on the left that we chopped up and threw into there with the brick and mortar, so that everything you're doing is a combination or a compilation of who you are versus just being a discrete pylon. When I say the discrete pylon, we tend to sometimes talk about our current position, or we specifically refer to something in college, or we talk about something, but what we really want to be doing is talking a holistic approach to this is who I am, this is the person I am, and this is why you want to hire me. So this is something about career foundation and about your value proposition really is, it's the bricks. It's everything you've done in your life, pulling them all together and drawing from them. And that's who you are today. You know, you're not just the person who got an MBA or an MS Analytics. You're not just the person who worked for 2 years at company X and then 3 years at company Y and then got promoted and things like that. It's all of these experiences are integrated together. So where do we go with that? We go to the value proposition, because when you think about interviewing, and it really doesn't matter what level it is, we can ask you a question a million ways. I can ask you a million different questions. I could come up with gotcha questions, ones that'll stump you. I could come up with easy ones, things like that. But at the end of the day, every question is asking you, how can you help us? Period. That's why I'm going to hire you. I'm not going to hire you if you can't help me. I sometimes paraphrase the how can you help us to how can you help me make money? But it's really all the same thing. So you really think, when you're thinking about an interview question, you want to be always saying, what can I tell them that is transferable to their business, directly or indirectly, that will show them I am the best person that's going to help them with whatever their needs are, whatever problems they're facing, whatever they have to do. So I want you to keep thinking about that too, because this is the cornerstone of any interview response, is how can I help you? Okay, so when we think about our value proposition, I boil it down to a really simple equation. Who plus what equals why you should hire me. Who am I? What do I offer? And that's why you should hire me. And it's really that simple, yet that complex when you're putting together a response and talking to someone in an interview session. It's also even just in general networking, when you're out there communicating people and, you know, you get to talking about business, you should always be, you know, what is it? Dennis Miller used to say, always be selling, and something like that. Well, you want to be doing that. So you want to be thinking about, who am I? What do I offer? And that's why you should hire me. So what we've done in some previous programs is we did a module on know thyself and the who I am. And you could do this on your own. Just take a bunch of, you know, verbs or adjectives and find those that best suit who you are and come up with 10 to 15 of these, because you want to be thinking, okay, these are the main points I want to show someone. I want to maybe show them I'm adaptable. Maybe this response, I want to show them creative. Maybe there's one I want to show them I'm resilient. Another one might be that I'm innovative, which goes, you know, with creative. You always want to know is who I am. And again, I have a whole separate program we can do on this one if anybody wants on an individual basis. But it's a pretty easy one to just come up with a list of adjectives. That's the first part of our equation. The second is what? This is the product of that. Did someone have a question? Okay, is what do I offer? And if you notice, I put these together here, and we've worked and developed these, you know, individually and as a group in the past. And notice that none of these are specific to any industry. They're not necessarily specific to a function. They're not necessarily specific to a company. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to, before we really can articulate our value proposition, we have to know who we are as a whole person, not being defined by our degrees, not being defined by our companies, not being defined by the functions or the roles we've been in or the industries. When you can do this, the who plus what equals why, I'll give you something to leave here later with and to think about. And I've, you know, run this example in previous programs is, let's pretend that I meet you, or for the first time, we're at a networking event and we don't know each other, and they say, you know, what brings you here? And I say, well, I'm looking for a seasoned professional, an MBA or an analytics professional. And they say, great, what do you do? What do you want them to do? And I say, don't worry about it. I just want someone, and you can tell them they'll be well compensated and intellectually stimulated. That person runs into you 15, 20 minutes later, and they ask you what you're doing, and you say, no, I'm networking, looking for a new opportunity. And they say, you see that guy, he's wearing that Mays Business School shirt across there, he's looking to hire someone. They go, great, what is he looking for? And they go, I don't know. You walk up to me, you come up stride confidently, a good handshake, although I think those days are gone. We'll do an elbow bump going forward. And you say, you know, I understand you're looking to hire someone, you know, with an MBA or an analytics degree. And, what are you looking for? And I say, well, that's great. Nice to meet you. You have 30 seconds to get me to hire you. Go. At that point, you're on your own. You can't say I work at Chevron. You can't say I work at Dell. You can't say I'm a manager in this industry or something like that, or an EMBA or PMBA or analytics or anything like that, because you don't really know anything about me. So you've got to be able to sell yourself without putting any of those on there. And that's where we go back to the bricks earlier. Those bricks are the foundation, because you don't know if I'm in services, if I'm in financial, if I'm in banking, maybe I'm looking for someone in IT, maybe I'm just a manufacturer of dental chairs or anything like that. So and that's where I want you to start really learning about yourself. And once you do that, that becomes the basis and the foundation for all of your interview answers. So these I offers, if you notice them, these are really part of a value proposition. These are not anything that you could tell what industry or what role this person is in from any of these. Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute and see if anyone has any questions, because then we're going to get into interview techniques themselves. Does this foundational approach make sense? Okay, I saw one head nod, but I only see 5 people on my screen, so I'll take that as a yes. Okay.
Can we ask the people who do not have their phones muted to please do so? I'm hearing children and a bunch of other household
Sure.
noise.
Well, thank you. If everyone just heard what was just requested, if you can put yourself on mute, it would be greatly appreciated. And it's kind of funny though, and so this afternoon, I was on a program with a managing partner from Bain Consultants, and they were talking about the new paradigm of people working from home. And it was just kind of funny. He was saying that, I've now been in meetings with team members of mine, and their dogs have walked in the rooms, their children and things like that. And he said, I guess we all have to get used to it and that, but that's just a sidebar from this, but please, do keep it muted so that we can, because we do have a lot of people on this. And thank you for bringing that to my attention. Okay, so I'm going to briefly just put up here, many of you may have seen STAR or R-STAR, which is a technique. But at the end of the day, what this is all about is when you're in an interview, for the most part, unless you're doing a case interview where it's something really specific where they want you to walk through, a case that they just gave you, we try to give our responses in a STAR or an R-STAR response format. It's about telling stories. It's all about telling stories. And so I want you to think back, those of you who gave some volunteered at the beginning, and think about how you could restructure your responses to fit into this. What we do is we talk about the situation, the task, the action, and the result. Okay, so the situation describes, this is where I was. This is what they required or asked me to do. That's basically your problem statement. We sometimes blend the S and the T together. Then we give the action. The action is the most important part, because I'm going to hire you for the way you think, for what you've done. Okay, the situation task is only there to give me some context or perspective, especially if you're making any kind of a pivot. It may not be directly relatable to me, but I want to hear the actions you did, so I can sit there and go, oh, this is great. I see the way they think. I see the way they put boundaries around that unstructured problem. I see the way they resolve that conflict, the techniques they use. That's why I'm looking to hire you for that. And then I need a result. A result just shows that you're not just saying something. Nobody's going to question you on the result unless it seems really outlandish. If you say on a $1 million project that I was the lead and, I was able to save and come in 3% under budget, $30,000, that's very believable. If you say on a $100,000 project, I came in $90,000 under budget, that's not believable, that you came in 90% under. So we just do a sniff test. So when you think about structuring your response, we use a rule of thumb that the situation and the task is maybe 20% of your response. So if you're going to give a 2-minute story, we would say about 25 seconds would be on the situation test. That's it, because it's not really relevant. Action is 70%. So I would spend almost 1.5 minutes telling me, this is what I did. Here's how I solved the problem. These are the actions I took. Here's the obstacles I overcame. And then I give the result, 10%, 10, 15 seconds. Again, that's just a closure on it. So that's the STAR format. We sometimes do what we call as an R-star, where we move the result up to the beginning, and that's the hook. And to say something, sure, let me tell you about the time I was able to improve a manufacturing process and reduce the downtime by 4%. Then you go into the situation, but I got to tell you, I'm like this. I'm sitting at the edge of my desk. I'm all ears. I want to learn how this person was able to, cut the downtime by 4%. So if it lends itself to, we give that result at the beginning. This is something you should etch into your brains, is the R-star or the STAR format. And I'm going to send this presentation out probably tomorrow, so you'll all be able to see this, be able to mull it over. But this is a format we really highly recommend people use. Any questions about this? Okay, so let's talk about key considerations in hiring. Okay, at the executive and the professional level, these are the 5 major attributes I am looking for in an individual. And for those of you who don't know my background, I actually started in executive search in 1994 and was a partner in 2 executive search firms, as well as my own firm from 94 to 08. So I've compiled these through just literally hundreds and thousands of engagements I've been in, and people I've interviewed, companies I've worked for, and represented, and so forth. It may not be every single one, but these are really what we're looking for. We're looking for results. I want to know the value you're going to add. If you can't tell me that, why would I hire you? Remember, go back to that question. How can you help us? How can you help me make money? Very important about your fit. I need to know your leadership and your management style fits into my organization. Some organizations, we're looking for people who are going to be micromanagers. Others, we're looking for people who are going to be more at the strategic level and just do a lot of more delegating, things like that. We need to know that you fit into our organizational culture. The impact, are you transformational? Are you influential? Are you going to be able to, especially if it's any sort of a transitional situation, a re-engineering, a rebuilding type of a situation? I want to know, because there's going to be a lot of dangers, a lot of traps. A lot of people may have resistance to change. I know we heard that one earlier. I believe it was from Monica about the changing and things like that. So I want to know that. I want to know you're going to be committed. I don't want to ever think that you're sitting across the desk from me just because it's a job. Okay? It's not. I'm looking for someone who literally is saying, this is the only company I want to be at. This is the only position I want to be in. And here's why, and here's how it's going to satisfy your needs. It's going to make you grow, meet your goals, all of those. And finally, I want to know your personal motivations. I want to know, why are you here? Okay, which is why, and I know we're in very unsettled times now, and so people may be looking because they may have been displaced, or they may feel there's a displacement coming. That's okay, but we don't want to necessarily think that's the only reason you're sitting there. I want to know what your goals are. So first, I want to know, what is your motivation to leave? I want to know where you want to go within my company. So it's not only the commitment to my company, but I want to know, where do you want to go? Okay, what is it about us? How are your goals going to mesh with our goals? And we're going to make this a very successful joining of the two. Okay, so you always want to know that the people on the other side of the desk, it's as much what's in it for them as it is what's in it for you. And so be careful on personal motivations that it doesn't become more of a I statement. I hear too many times I say, well, this is a company where I know I can grow. This is a company where I know they welcome people to speak up, to challenge the status quo. That's okay. But I want to know how you're going to make my organization better by implementing those, because that's what motivates you, is to be a challenger, to be a change agent. Thoughts, questions about this? I want you to keep these in mind, and we're going to do this as we go through our questions later when we revisit. Okay, so What are my expectations from an executive or a professional hire? This is just a subset of them. There's probably 100 of them or more. It'll be different for every position. It'll be different for every company. But I want you to keep in mind, I'm looking for someone who can develop strategies, and not just develop the strategies, but then create and translate the initiatives from the strategies into actions. Someone who can drive the execution to get successful results. Someone who communicates to engage, that gets to influential, persuasion, that could be even about conflict management. Someone who creates accountability. Footnote about creating accountability today, it is really important that if we don't, that we do get ourselves very up to speed in using data to create accountability. I think the days of soft goals are probably well behind us. And now, we're going to those smart, measurable, achievable goals with results. Okay, so we want to be able to work data into the accountability. I want someone who can align systems and processes. Okay, especially this is very big, and we're probably going to be seeing this a lot going forward in the oil and gas industry as there's a shake up there, as smaller players are bought up or absorbed into some of the larger players. You're going to have to see a lot of the realignment of the systems and processes between the two organizations. I want someone who knows how to measure progress. So that's somebody who's not just creates the accountability and says, okay, this is the end goal, but someone who can keep me abreast, who knows how to measure and will be able to identify when we have pain points or pressure points that may be coming. Because the last thing we ever want to hear at the end of a project or anything like that is, well, we weren't successful because of this. What we want to actually hear was, we encountered the following problems, but we had systems in place that we were able to overcome those throughout the process and keep ourselves on track in getting the measurable and the result that we set out for. So these are things that you want to be thinking about in your life, in your experiences, in that amalgamated person that you are. What are the stories I can tell that are going to show people that I can do several of these? Okay, I want you to be that person who is my dream employee. And I can tell you that a good interviewer probably will know it within the first question or two, if not sooner, if this is the right person for the role, if this is the person, because they're gonna see the way that person's communicating, articulating their vision. They're going to see the person really has tied themselves to the organization versus just throwing things separately, going back to silos, that the person really understands what I need and is doing a great job in telling me the stories and showing me, this is how I'm going to help you do each one of these. This is how I'm going to help you fix your problems. This is going to help you grow. This is all of these things. So I want you to keep these in mind. So let's before we go back into talking about the questions, let's take a pause here. I'm open for any questions that anybody has about this. I know, again, as go back to what my objective was at the beginning. My objective for tonight was to just get you thinking about different things, okay, so that you can start creating the foundation for being a more value-added interviewee. Excuse me. Any questions? Okay, so before we go in, because the next thing we're going to do is let's talk now about framing your responses, because we're going to pull these together. But before that, I'm going to actually give you an example that I give for something to help keep you aligned as you're interviewing and giving your responses. Because what I have seen through the years is a lot of responses to questions that end up going nowhere. There's a lot of good stuff, but the dots aren't connected. They're not pulled together. So I'm going to give you an analogy that I hope you'll think about as you're preparing for interviews or as you're in interviews. But let's pretend we're back in good times and we're not in the shelter in place, and you wake up on a weekend and your significant other, friend, whoever says, let's go on a road trip. So you jump in the car and you're just driving. And you're driving and you're driving and you're driving, but you didn't really pick anywhere to go, you're just driving. And one of two things happens. One, it gets dark, and so you look at each other and say, well, let's just turn around and go home. Or the other thing is you run out of gas. You weren't watching, maybe you're on that stretch of I-10 where it's miles between gas stations and you run out of gas. Well, that's what happens in an interview. And I've heard this and I've seen this so many times. When you don't have a goal for your response, and you don't know where am I going with this answer, you just drive. And I've seen then students, I've seen in executive search candidates, what happens is they just stop, and I just like bump my head into a brick wall because I'm waiting for more and more, and it's like they just threw this wall down for me. Or they start circling back, that's the U-turn, because they realize, uh-oh, my response isn't good, I'm gonna go to another response. And I can tell you that never, ever works. So what I want you to think about in when you're preparing for interviews is it's a three-step process. The first step is when you hear a question coming from the interviewer, is what do they want to learn about me? Okay. Is that a question that they're looking to learn about my conflict resolution? Is that about they're looking to learn my analytics ability? Is that they want to learn about my empathy? Is this something about my resourcefulness or creativity or working with ambiguity? But what is that overriding bucket that they want to learn about me? Then, most importantly, I say is, what do I want them to learn about me? Okay, where am I going with this answer? Remember we talked earlier, there was no destination. Well, this is the destination. I'm gonna pick a parking lot out at some place, somewhere, and that's where my goal is. And that way I know I can drive, I can fly right to it. And I'm always gonna keep my eyes focused on that end goal. This way I'm not gonna get into the situation where I run out of gas or I have nothing more to say. So that's what I want you to do, is pick that. So maybe you say, this is a question where they wanna know how I deal with ambiguity, and I want them to know how really I excel at putting structure and process and boundaries around unstructured processes and problems like that. I'm able to set up the scales, I'm able to bound them and be able to create what wasn't there. And then the third thing is you get your story. But if you know where you're going, I can pretty much tell you, you're always gonna give a great response, because you're not gonna stop your story until you get there. You're also gonna keep some of the extraneous stuff out, because you're gonna say, well, that doesn't really matter. Sort of like if you go on the road trip and you stop, just to get a bite to eat or something, unless it was a remarkable restaurant, it's not something you're gonna tell somebody, oh, and we stopped and I had a hamburger at McDonald's, and things like that. So it keeps you focused. So I want you to keep that in mind here, and we need to blend these together. We need to know that these are the key considerations people are looking for, and these are the expectations that they're going to have for me in the role in an executive or a leadership position in their organization. Do I have not only do I have the stories, do I have the right stories to tell them? All right, make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's go and talk about that. Now, look at this first question. Now we're circling back here. So the first question was, and Monica gave us that one, that was, tell me about a time you brought significant change to an organization. How did you implement it, and what resistance did you have to overcome? Well, that was a very basic question about change management. What I want to learn from this, does anyone want to guess which is the most important part of that question? There are three parts to it. Which is the most important part and why? I'll take a volunteer.
How you negotiated or how you handled that resistance?
Okay, good. That is, to me, that's the most important part. Because if it was a change that was easy, that doesn't really tell me much about your capabilities, okay? We all can do the easy ones. I want to know the obstacles you overcame. I want to know how you persuaded people, the influencing tools and techniques you used, okay, changes that because of resistance, changes you made, okay, maybe in the path that you took. Those are the things I want to learn about. And that's where you're going to pull that from who you are and from that specific experience. And I want to learn also about what you learned. I want to know how it changed you. Because if you had to overcome obstacles and resistance, then it had to have some impact on you. And that's, to me, going to be the most important one, is because it's easy to find people who implemented change, but it was easy. But it's more difficult to find people who really have that ability to influence people. And if you think about it and you look at any great leaders, it's all about influencing. It's all about, how do I get the people who work for me to follow my vision and to implement it, period.
And Mitch, this is Mahesh. In this context, do you think, maybe it is, but I just want to pose out this question out there.
Yes.
Change management is a good thing to have between before and after, because there is a reason why we want the change. And but there is also an aspect of feedback that is given during these discussions. And those are not to be taken lightly, right? Because those feedbacks are definitely meant to be doing in another way, not necessarily the change that you want to bring it to the table. I think that goes with the communication to engage, right? I believe, as an aspect. Okay.
Yeah, right. So what Mahesh is asking and is saying about is that part of this, you may have gotten feedback from people. Okay.
Right.
Well, and then, so how did you react to it? Okay. How did you incorporate it? And that gets into your leadership style. It also gets into your influence, because you might get feedback from somebody and you may disagree with it, or not only disagree, you may know it's not right, but how did you then overcome that and get them to flip and come on board so that they became a positive contributor to this change? Absolutely. Thank you, Mahesh.
Sure.
Okay, so that's what this question is. So, Monica, I want you to think about your initial response and how you might modify that now, okay, to add some of these key considerations and hit upon the expectations. You want to give it a quick whirl with a minute response?
Okay, I'm thinking about this.
Okay.
So elevator speech. When we did the initial when we initially were purchasing the land leases from a company that was all digital and moving them into a non-digital world, the managers and the IT were okay with the proposition of this Band-Aid. Where everything went, and everybody was on board to do this, there were rollouts, training sessions on how to use this system so that each business unit could look for their information and could continue working and teaching everybody how to work in this system. So everything worked there. I had management on board for it because it was using technology that already existed in the company. So there wasn't anything that was going to affect the budget, because just the purchase was already going over. So there wasn't any money to do anything with the data once we received the data. Nobody thought, the powers above me did not think that far of those kind of obstacles. So my approach to solving the problem, it was well received. When we got the pushback was, now that we have this information, where can we load it so it can properly be stored for the prosperity of the company? Nobody wanted to commit money to that, which at the time there were layoffs, budgets were not getting approved, only for crucial projects. So this makeshift system had to remain in place to keep the business going. Because it did prove itself to be sustainable, I guess it was too good of a temporary solution. So everybody's, it works. They didn't want to do anything with it. And there weren't any holes. We couldn't show them any holes to move forward with the system. Because as I said before, items were being backed up to the main drive. So we didn't have to worry about anything crashing and losing losing all of this well data.
Mm-hmm.
So it was almost, the process was too good, so it failed itself in being able to be put into a record of system.
Okay. And what did you learn from this?
I guess not to, I must have learned something because I got a really good grade on my capstone. And what I ended up doing was, in order to save this from being destroyed in the future, I took my capstone, I wrote up the processes from that of how basically a lessons learned of how this project should continue, where we were, the current situation, and how to continue in the project. And I also put in there expectations of how it should be moved forward once a budget was given, if a budget ever existed to allow it to move into a different area.
Okay.
What I learned from that, I think, is I think myself as the leader for this and the IT group, I think we did it a little bit too well, and it didn't fail. But I don't know what it's doing now. 7 years later, I really don't know what it's doing. For all I know, Chevron sold off those leaseholds and just downloaded the data and sent them on its all merry way. But I don't think that you should not do something to the best of your capability. But I think you should also, in this case, I should have put a budget in there for moving forward. This is now, and this is the expected cost for the future, and a date that it would need to be moved in there. I did not put that in. So that may have been an area that should have been improved on, I think.
Okay. So are you looking at this question differently now than you did earlier?
Yeah, now I'm seeing it as to, okay, I made a significant change to the organization. I was able to implement it with training and other methodologies to get it rolled out. The resistance came, and because I did not totally prepare it out with a budget in the foreseeable future. And that's something that I should have taken and put in there to make it a complete success, even though it was a success. But just to secure it, to make it, as you put, what was your concrete? It was a pylon.
Yeah.
And it needed a good solid foundation.
Okay.
And I feel like I left that out by not putting a budget in for the foreseeable future on how to handle the documents, other than letting them roll into, Chevron's nightly backup.
Right. Good. All right. Well, good. I'm glad that you've evolved a little. Okay. So then our next one was the most difficult decision you've made. How did it impact you? And Robert talked about the layoffs, and that's just really about decision making. Robert, how have your thoughts morphed on your response from earlier?
Yeah, thank you. So let me tell you about a time when I had to shrink our organization because the company was losing money, and yet we still met all of our objectives and key KPIs by the end of the year. So worked at Delta Airlines back during the airline, the challenges with the overall industry. And we were faced with shrinking the organization about 15% across the board. At the time, I led an organization of about 24 people, and I had to, do my part. I had to shrink that organization. So it was the very first time I had to do that. I've never had to lay anyone off, so it was a real challenge for me. I sat down and looked at the talent that we had and the team that we had, balanced that against the priorities of what my organization needed to do across the rest of the organization. Arrived at what the new team makeup needed to be, and then immediately worked with HR to inform the team members that weren't going to be part of that going forward, and did my best to transition or help them transition to their next employment. What I didn't personally anticipate was the impact to the existing team that still stayed with Delta at the time. Very quickly realized that they were having emotional issues even worse, unfortunately, than the folks that were laid off. So we ended up having to drop back and have daily sessions, really, where we all got together in a room and just talked about what the impact of the work was going to be, what the impact of losing the ability to see their friends and colleagues on a daily basis. Their colleagues didn't pass away, obviously. But also they continued to see other colleagues that weren't on our team being escorted out to the parking lot. So we did that daily for about 2 months, and then continually let them express their fears and their opinions, and but then focus them back on what we needed to continue to do to save the organization. Well, let's face it, we had to do what we had to do to save the overall organization.
Okay. And how have you evolved on your thinking about this question?
Yeah, a great question. Appreciate you asking. So it was a struggle for me because I'd never laid anyone off, never been through that process. Personally, having to end someone's employment. And then secondly, just the emotional process. I'm really not cut that way. I'm more of a direct sort of engineer type person. So I had to get in touch with both my feelings and try and empathize and relate to the folks that were working with me. Sure. And then from that, I have carried that with me forward it helped me grow as an individual and how I could relate to other folks' emotional state of mind through various challenges, not just layoffs.
Okay, good. Thank you. And are you thinking of this one differently now than you did earlier in the program and last night?
Yeah, I did. So I never thought about phrasing this in terms of a star or an R star. So that was real helpful because this process here was real helpful. I struggle with part of this because I think someone said it earlier. I don't ever feel like you fail until you stop trying. And my mentor at Delta taught me sort of an amazing lesson at the time. He said, look, every idea has its own time and place. You may have the greatest idea in the world, but if it's not the right time, then it's just not going to happen. So there's been several things that I've done that haven't been successful, but yet would have been successful in a different time or a different place, and we dropped back and did something else or something.
How do I have to mute?
Okay, hold on. Can everybody please make sure they're muted? Can everybody please make sure they're muted?
Whoa. Hey, Mitch, you can actually mute everyone.
I'm looking for it on my, I'm looking, but I don't see it. Okay.
Marquavius, if you're on, if you could assist.
Okay, I think we got him.
Excellent.
If you pull up participants, right at the very bottom, it'll say mute all.
Yeah, I've got two screens on it. The problem is I've got different screens on. So, okay, I think we got him though. Quiet.
Oh, you'll have to go up to the top where it's green. It says you're viewing.
Yep, I'm in there. Oh, manage.
And,
okay.
And then you have to hit more.
Got it. Got him. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Robert. Appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for your understanding of this. This is my first major big presentation. I've usually been doing smaller groups, so I'm learning myself a little bit, so I probably have a good star story about this that I could tell in my next interview. Oh, Julie, you didn't hear that. Okay, let's talk about the next one, which was Jamie. Describe a high-impact experience that forced you to learn to do something differently or to behave very differently.
Well, Mitch, firstly, I was just going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, talk about developing new skills and competencies. I think you have something you can add to your next interview after our call tonight. So you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
I think in the essence of time, I might just, instead of reliving the story, maybe just, from my perspective, if you were asking me this question in an interview and thinking about how I answered it, a bit ago,
yeah,
I think what might be trying to be, what do they want to learn about me is probably a little bit about the fit and my style and my impact with regards to how I lead people through influence and my transformational, etc. So, I think if I think about the story I told earlier and recreating that in a bit of a sort of a flow, I would probably think a little bit more intentionally about how I structure that to hit those points, but also to get across sort of that what do I want them to learn about me, the fact that it was a big expansion on my influential leadership skills and my ability to exercise a growth mindset in a completely new role in a completely new environment. So I'll leave it at that in the essence of time.
okay. Oh, great. Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Then we talked about resiliency. Describe a time you failed at implementing. And remember, we talked about failure is a lesson learned. And Monica and Mahesh both talked about that. Mahesh, you want to just give us, in the same way that Jamie did something about how your thinking might have evolved on how you would respond to this question from earlier to now? Assuming Mahesh is still here. Okay, if not, Monica, you want to give us a quick 30 seconds on how your thinking would have evolved?
Sure. When I left this particular project, I did not feel that it was a failure. It just did the strategy I was not able to implement. And what I did to ensure a safety net is in the time that nobody was wanting to meet with me, I wrote out a playbook, lessons learned, and how I advised to go forward, and passed it out and in hopes that they could then take this at their time when they were ready to implement the strategy that needed to be implemented. So I didn't feel like it really failed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it was the right time, and I don't think that there were the right managers there to really understand what needed to be done.
Okay, so the lesson you learned from it was?
Well, it wasn't my fault.
Okay.
I learned at this point not to take these things as personal failures.
Okay.
I learned that this had to be, I had to go in and I had to have like a team of 30 people buy into this. I had to have higher up managers. This had to be pushed down from the top driven down. And if I didn't get that, I fulfilled what I needed, what I was asked to do, to come in and assess the situation. And I did all of the exercises. So that's why when I left with the manager that had asked me to come in, I left a playbook, lessons learned, and how to move forward and implement this.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. And our last question was on team building. That was Victor. What do you look for in a team member? What behaviors and performances? And you had mentioned that you look for people who are complementary, who will challenge you because you're flexible, and people who are motivated and engaged. How is your thinking on your response
So
Well,
one of the, in retrospect, one of the things I now realize is that I might have sound a bit like this is what I like, and this is the type of people I like to work with, and not necessarily bring it back to why it matters to the company I'm interviewing with. So I would, if I were to do it differently, I would tie those behaviors back to how they could influence or impact on the company.
you know, and as we approach the end here, I just have a little bit more. Victor, that was a great way to almost wrap everything up, because at the end of the day, every response we give has to show the interviewer the value I will add to their organization. It's all about them, not about me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so that's a great way to lead into you know, as we wrap up here. Okay, so I did add this slide earlier today because I just thought it would be something good as we wrap up here about video interviewing, because many of us probably over the next 6 months are going to be doing video interviewing. In fact, I've only heard of one person who's interviewed in person in the last month or something like that. But everybody's really gone to this. And even when we're out of this, this maybe, it was already becoming more of a norm. We had definitely seen it on our master's level programs and full-time MBA, more and more companies going to virtual. And I think this is just going to really push just about everybody there. But so in addition to your standard preparation, you got to be careful of your environment. Okay, what is the noise around me? Now, again, granted, like the Bain individual today, the managing partner said that, you know, they're getting used to that and they're giving a little more leeway on that because people are in situations now that are not normal, but you don't want to be in a noise environment. Watch your lighting. You certainly don't want to be by an open window. Your background needs to be plain or something, nothing controversial. You know, I was talking to a student the other day, and no political comment here, but he was getting ready for a video interview. He was in a room and he had a gun rack on the right behind him. And I just said, look, it doesn't matter what I think about it. I'm just telling you, I don't know who you're interviewing with and if that's going to go over well. So just something, you know, be cautious or things like that. A presentation, you know, again, make sure we're sitting up straight. We want to be, this is a funny one. You want to be in your full interview attire, assuming that the company has told you, you know, hasn't told you it's business casual or casual or something. And my whole funny thing about that is I've actually seen a few people do interviews where they've worn, like a male has worn a shirt and tie and a jacket, but then they're wearing shorts or sweatpants underneath. And, you know, you don't want to be the one where the interviewer asks you to stand up and you're caught, you know, wearing your shorts or something. And check your technology. Make sure you have a good, strong internet connection, your computer interface, check your camera, and so forth. Know that it's a much limited field of vision for both you and the interviewer, even if it's a one-on-one. They're probably only seeing maybe from your chest, you know, down, depending on how far you sit in the camera. So there's going to be a lot less body language that you're going to be able to read. So just be wary and aware of that. And the same thing for the person receiving it on the other end. And make sure to look at the camera. Sometimes people start looking to the sides and things like that. Well, or they have notes that they put somewhere. Well, if you're looking to the side, to me, it looks like you're not looking at me on the camera. And just know that the interviewer's concentration and attentiveness might not be the same, because they might be, you know, just showing you their head, and they might be multitasking, responding to emails or doing other things. So if anything, in a video interview, I would be even more concise and precise with my responses. So wrapping this all up, basically, if you can show me the fit, show me your value you're going to add, and your transferable skills, that's the reason I'm going to hire you. It's really that simple. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it open it up to questions here. Anyone just chime right in. If you want, anyone who wants to stay on, I'll be here to answer questions, you know, until the last person is done with those. You have my email there. I will send the presentation out tomorrow in a PDF form. If you want to schedule a coaching appointment with me to talk about this or any other aspect of your career management, just send me an email and we'll figure out a time and a place that works for for both of us, we'll just set up a Zoom. What you do is I'll get back to you, and then I'll register you and send you a Zoom calendar just like we did for tonight. So with that, let me open up. Any questions? Anything anybody wants to talk about here?
Mitch?
Yes.
Mitch, hi, this is Julie. So some folks may not be able to unmute their microphones now, so I've asked them to go ahead and send their questions to me, and then I will
Okay.
those to you. So one question is, what is your recommendation on selection of your references?
Okay, well, references, that's a very interesting one. References, because obviously we don't want to pick somebody who's not going to talk glowing about it. But what I would recommend in a reference is try to have a bunch of references. So maybe have 5, 8 people, because you want to pick the person who can best speak to what your new role is going to be. So that might be someone who knows you as a, work with, let's say you're looking for a new position where you're going to be managing people. So you might want to have a subordinate as one, somebody who worked for you as one of your references, so they can talk about what it was like to work for you. You might want to have a boss or a former boss, so they can talk about what it was like, having you report to them. Maybe a peer, someone who you interacted with, so who could work at all those levels. If it's project management, you might want to find somebody who is not even in your department or your team, but you managed on a project or worked together on a project, who could talk about your being able to work cross-functional, multidisciplinary, and things like that. So it's going to be situational about who you pick, and that's why it's always good to have, a number of references that you can just pick and choose from.
Hey, Mitch, this is Robert Heitz again. So
yes.
On the topic of references, what's your feeling on a pre-printed reference sheet with those references' opinion already written out of you?
Well, okay, so first thing, I would never, ever give that to anybody unless they specifically asked for it, because to just give it is sort of presumptuous that somebody wants it. They're okay if that's all you can get, but the reason I like a live reference is it can be more situational, and they can respond to a more specific question, versus a generic one. Now, having said that, a lot of people don't want to give a live reference. Either they just don't feel personally comfortable, or possibly even their organization has policy against them giving a reference. So in that case, you maybe can go to a written reference in that scenario. So I'm not a big fan of references myself, because honestly, who's going to give a reference that isn't going to say something good? So, but those would be the way I would do it. But whatever you do, never give anything written unless somebody asks for it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Let's see if we have any in the chat now that I can actually access that. Got that one. Okay. Anybody else with questions? Either send them through chat or send them to Julie, or just chime right in.
Hey, Mitch, this is Tim Nolte. I had a question on fit. I've had that as kind of a mystery box on a couple of, when getting feedback on interviews and stuff, they talk about fit and things like that. Is it always about leadership and management style, or is there any other aspects to fit as it comes to?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, again, and it depends on the role, and it depends on the company, because fit means a lot of things. It's obviously leadership style and management style, but it also could be problem solving, the way you approach problems. It could be, Amazon is someone like that. Okay, Amazon is looking for people who are not afraid to take risks. Okay, they're looking for those people who will look for alternate solutions. They'll look for people who will disagree and go toe-to-toe in a meeting with somebody, but then as they all walk out that door, they're all agreed and on the same page. So it's not just, a lot of things we can say they fall under leadership style, but sometimes it's just cultural fit. The consultants, the famous story about consultants is when they're looking to hire somebody to join the team, is they do the airport test. They're basically saying, can I stand being stuck in an airport for 12 hours with this person because we're snowed in somewhere? And so that gets down to a more of a personal as well as a professional level. So no, I wouldn't, it's not just about your management style. It's again, will you rock the boat? Is this someone who fits into our mode? The cost, this is a survey that was done a couple of years ago. I think it might've been McKinsey who did it. They say the cost of a bad hire could be up to $200,000. Because they looked at beyond just the salary that may have been paid to somebody for a month or two that they lasted. They look at all the lost costs on the front end of recruiting the person, of onboarding them, lost productivity and things like that. So fit is corporate culture. And if you think about corporate cultures, they're all very different. You go into the tech sector, they want people who are going to put themselves out there and take those calculated risks more than you might find somebody in O&G looking for that persona. Does that help?
Yep. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mitch. This is Anup here. A quick question for you.
Yes.
Is there any difference when you're hiring internally versus externally for a senior position?
Well, yes and no. Obviously, when I'm hiring internally, I know the person, or I should know of the person, or I might have some records that I might be able to see, performance reviews, depending upon how it's structured, at that organization. I also know that this is a person who probably at least fits into the greater culture of the greater entity. But I still would want to know that they fit into the microculture of my team, because the culture in my team might be different from another, someone across the hall or in another building or something like that, even though with the same company. So it would be different in that respect. What I wouldn't be worrying about as much would be the commitment to the company, because obviously if you've been with us and you want to stay with the company, I know that there's something that resonates with you. So I would probably be looking more at the micro level of the fit within my department and the competencies that were transferable, especially if you were trying to make a pivot into my team. Thank you.
Thank you,
Does that answer help you?
Yes, thanks.
Sure.
Mitch, you do have a question regarding virtual backgrounds when it comes to interviewing online. So do you have a recommendation of a virtual background if lighting is not good or background is not good?
Julie, you probably noticed, and everyone has seen it tonight, and you've seen it from our staff meetings, I'm a plain vanilla guy. I have a plain wall behind me, and I specifically set it up that way. But it's okay if you have a background. I'll be honest with you, if you're interviewing externally, don't put your company background up. I don't know that if I'm Shell and I'm interviewing you, that I want to see a Chevron logo every time I look at you on this. So I would try to keep it muted. You know what, I have taken to liking, in watching news shows at night and all the talking heads. There's some people who have nice library setups and things like that, and I think those are okay. It softens it a little bit. So that's what I would say about that. The lighting is more of a problem during the day. I know I had that problem because to the left of me is a window, so I tend to get shadows on my right side because of the way it is. But I will tell you, up to 5 weeks ago, shading was more of an issue in a video interview than it is today. Again, this goes back to what I heard today, and just in general, people are becoming a little bit more forgiving that we all don't have the perfect studio setups in our home. I hope that helps whoever asked the question.
It did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's a familiar voice. John, right?
Yes, sir.
Good to hear from you. Anybody else? All right, well, wonderful. Well, with that, I will wrap it up. Again, if anybody wants to to set something up with me, just send me an email. If you do, send me, also give me a couple of suggested dates and times, because otherwise I'm just going to come back to you and say, okay, what are your suggested dates and times? And we'll figure things out. If not, I wish everybody just be safe, be healthy, be well, and try to make the best of the current situation. Julie, anything you want to add? Or Marquavis, anything?
All good for me.
I'm all good.
Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thank you, everybody. Much appreciate your joining us tonight. Have a great rest of the week and everything. Take care.
Thank you, Mitch.
Mitch.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.